We can now view all projects, we can create a project, we can view a project, we can edit the project, and we can list all tasks associated with each project, as well as complete them. Next, we need a section below to add a new task to this project. So I'm going to go back to Sublime. Here is our show page where we list all of the various tasks. So now below here, we can add a new task. Once again, we'll need a form. And let's add a new Bulma text field for the description of the new task. All right, so let's take a look. There we go. Why don't we give that a class of box? And then we just need to push it down a little bit. Or maybe we can do that here as well. All right, good enough for me. So now think about it. When I fill out this form and I click on a button that we need to add, that should submit a post request to add a new task specifically to this project. Okay, so let's see, right down here, let's add a Bulma submit field called add task. There we go. And then finally, we want this to be a post request to, and let's make sure we stay consistent. So if I go back to our routes file, here is the endpoint we've decided upon, but that's to update an existing task. Now, again, we need to think about this. Now, it's true, I could do post request to /tasks, and that would hit a project task controller at store. Or we could do projects/project/tasks. Again, both of those options are very common and perfectly acceptable. One quick note though, if you take this form, then as part of that request, we need to send through information on which project we are adding a task to. Because if you think about it, with this approach, well, the associated project is included in the URI. But with this other one, it's not. So we would need to add a hidden input to the form, just so along with the push request, we can specify, well, what project are we dealing with here? So with that in mind, I'm going to take this approach. All right, so we'll say /projects/ the ID of this project /tasks. Finally, we add our CSRF field. All right, so let's give it a refresh. So we fill this out, submit the form, and now we have our next step. The store method does not exist. All right, project tasks controller. Add a new method up here called store. We'll use route model binding to fetch the associated project, and then I will import that. Now, I'll show you two ways that we can write this logic, with the second way being the one that I would recommend. To start, if we're adding a new project, we could say task create, just like any other model. Now, if you need a refresher on the attributes, here is our database. We need to send through the description and the project ID. All right, so the description will be what was included with the form, and that's why we have an input with the name of description. So we'll grab that. Next, the project ID will be project ID. Remember, that's an instance of project. So that will be one of these records here. Or I'm sorry, let's go to projects. That'll be one of these projects here. So we're just going to grab the ID field there and assign it. So yes, you could take this approach and then once again, return back. Let's see if that works. We'll go to Chrome, switch back, add a new task, and there we go. Here's another one. And we'll complete both. Easy. So what's the issue with this approach? Well, actually, nothing at all. But sometimes there's a more expressive way to go about it. When possible, I like to take this approach instead. Project, well, what are we doing to the project? We're adding a task, right? Okay, well, I said add task, so I'm going to make a method called add task. And this is why it's important, even if you're all by yourself, to simply talk out loud, speak what you're trying to do. And then you find the common words in those sentences and you work it into your API. So when I tell you, all right, well, we need to add a task to a project, well, it sounds like we need a method called add task. Now, here's the benefit as well. Because we already have access to the project, we no longer need to declare what the associated project ID is. We're kind of digging into database fields there. Instead, let's simply provide the description of the task. Okay, so if we were to give that a shot, of course it's going to fail because there is no add task method. So that's our next step. I'm going to open up our project model in the app directory. and we'll add a new method, add task. At the moment, we're just accepting a description. Okay, well now here, yes, we could just take all of this. I'm going to show you two ways once again. I can paste all of that in, and we could say task create, project ID is this ID, and the description is what you gave us, and we will return that new task. Yeah, you could do that. So let's take a look. I can get rid of all of this, and I think this, at the very least, is a bit more expressive. When I hit the store method, I will add a task to the given project. So let's make sure this works. Does this work? Oh, we got a typo. Okay, give it a refresh. And yes, it does work. But as it turns out, if we go back to a project model, again, I think this is fine. But we already have a relationship to tasks here. So what we can do with Eloquent is say, this tasks, create a new one with the given description. Or, like we learned before, I can just say compact. And now I can get rid of this entirely. So notice when we take this approach, because Laravel and Eloquent already knows the associated project, it will apply the project ID automatically based upon the current project instance. So that's one less thing we have to be responsible for. All right, let's give it another shot. And that works as well. Nifty. So let's go back to our project's controller. This is looking pretty clean to me, but notice we do need to add validation. So for example, if I submit the form without adding anything to the input, we get that same issue as before. So we're going to do those two layers of validation once again. First, on the back end, I'm going to validate the request. Request validate that the description is in fact required. And that's the only thing I care about for now. Or again, don't forget, you could say min 255, which is often a good practice. Okay, so that will give us the validated attributes. And then I will pass that here. Okay, so now I can no longer do that. You'll see it just redirects back here. So it sounds like, once again, we need to display those errors. But let's think. If we go to the project/create page, this is the page where, of course, you can create a new project. And you'll remember that we do have these errors down below. So if we take a look here, let's just grab that and see if we can reuse it. And actually on that note, while we're here, I'm going to return the required attributes that we removed just for the demo earlier. Anyways, if I go back here, let's see if down below I can paste this in and see, does that work? So refresh, submit it, and it does work. So if it sounds like I can reuse this in multiple places, maybe I can extract this to a partial. With Blade, I can use a new directive, include. What are we including? Well, how about errors? Okay, let's go ahead and create that. Now, when we call include, of course, it's going to look in the resources views directory. So let's add a new file here called errors.blade.php, and I will paste that in. Okay, now we get the exact same thing. However, if we now return to project/create, we can get rid of some of this repetition. So right here, I'm going to replace it like so. So now if we add a task, we see the errors, or if we create a task, we get them. Let's turn it off. Anyways, we get them here as well. That should make our life a bit more simple. Finally, our second form, like we did earlier, on the show page, let's make sure that you are required to enter a new task. So that'll give us some browser validation, but even if the user bypasses it, we'll have backend validation as well. Refresh. Now I can't submit it at all. Great. So we submit it. Oh, we have an issue. Let's see. Grammar parameterize must be of type array. Okay, let's debug together. We must have made a little mistake. So we get the valid attributes and we pass that to add task and add task accept. Oh, there it is. So we accepted an array. This will now be something like description equals what you typed in. But then we pass that to add task. But over here, we were still under the assumption that we were receiving a description, but we're not. We're accepting task attributes now. So we can take this approach instead. Okay, makes sense? So we give it one final shot, and now it's working. Good work.